Hey everyone, welcome to the show today. What an exciting conversation it is going to be. Joining me now for a one-on-one talk about all things Tesla, Elon Musk, and the intersection of Musk and the election is Farzad Mesbahi, former Tesla insider. Farzad, thanks for being here again. Good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, JD. Always exciting to talk with you. And boy, do we have some spicy stuff to talk about today.
You're not kidding. And we're about 45 days out from the election. And even if it's not a political conversation, we are talking about a very important political figure. But let's talk about first some of his other businesses. Tesla, of course. The company has a very stacked month of October coming up. Third quarter deliveries, huge Robotaxi event around the corner, Q3 earnings. Talk to me about the details you're looking for in those events, given your history and how closely you cover the space.
Yeah, I think the Robotaxi event is like, top 1, 2, 3 storylines for Tesla here in the next few weeks. This is something, a technology that we're working at for 6, 8 years. And it looks like this event is finally going to be the culmination of all that work that they've put towards that technology. They're finally going to have something to truly show the world that says, hey, this is what we've been working on this whole time. We kept telling you it's going to be next year or in the next 6 weeks or in the next 2 weeks or whatever. But they finally have a event where the company's going to look to prove to the investor base, to the people that are following the storyline closely, that they do have something ready to go to market relatively soon. The way I'm looking at this event is I think it's twofold. One, it's will Tesla release some sort of vehicle or show some sort of vehicle that's purpose built to be fully autonomous from the ground up, meaning no steering wheel, no pedals, kind of like a Waymo on crack, right? That's kind of or steroids, whatever word you want to use for this scenario, but just something that's very, very much looking into the future of what autonomous vehicles are going to look like. So that's one. And then the second one is also, if you follow the story closely, they have this software suite called FSD or full self-driving, which is their self-driving solution. They're sort of, it's kind of like a very advanced driver assistance feature that is hoping to be fully automated with the current fleet of vehicles. And those two things are kind of intertwined because that software stack is what's going to drive this brand new product. So I'm curious to see if they're going to have any additional information about that as well. Maybe they'll pair the 1010 event with a brand new software update that will enable the current fleet to be very close to being fully self-driving, maybe with supervision still, but perhaps the interventions for a driver to take over are maybe in the thousands of miles instead of like the tens of the hundreds of miles that's at now. Even though there's been some big improvements in the last few months since they released their end-to-end neural net architecture with version 12, there's still an open question that says, will the current fleet be able to drive itself truly without somebody paying attention? And I think 1010 is going to look to answer a lot of those questions. And at the very least, we'll get some sort of timeline, I think. We'll get some sort of roadmap, true hardcore roadmap that says, hey, this is what we have cooking, this is when it's coming, and here's what we're doing to get there. So a lot riding on this event. I'll tell you, as a Tesla investor myself since 2012, 1010 is probably as exciting for me as the Model 3 unveil was in 2016 or 15 or whenever that was. I think it was 2016. It's the top 2, top 3 Tesla event for sure.
And that's what Elon Musk exactly posted onto Twitter, onto X not long ago. He said basically a version of the same thing, right? He said the Robotaxi reveal will be the company's most significant moment since the Model 3 unveil, which is almost a decade ago. For people that maybe follow Tesla as a stock, maybe follow the litany of Elon Musk related stories or headlines or controversies, help us better understand specifically why the Robotaxi part of the business and what you hope to learn, Farzad, in the next few weeks is so big. What makes this such a standalone moment for this long-running history of the company?
Yeah, so the Robotaxi event is going to look to answer a huge question, which is Tesla's ability to offer a self-driving vehicle, which is going to be a fraction of the cost per mile of a not only a driverless vehicle today from, say, a Waymo or another company, but also just like an Uber or a taxi driver. And the reason why this is so important is if you think about Tesla's advantage, from my viewpoint, Tesla's advantage in this case, they've built about, call it 2 million units per year run rate of manufacturing capacity for vehicles that utilize 8 cameras and an onboard computer that with a software update, the company hopes to be able to allow them to drive themselves. if you compare this to, say, a competitor like a Waymo or a Zoox or any other, the litany of other self-driving car companies that utilize sensors like LiDAR and radar and ultrasonics and, I don't know, sonar, just name a sensor, okay? It's probably on those self-driving vehicles. Incredible technology. Like, don't get me wrong. What Waymo has achieved is phenomenal. They've paved the way for a lot of different companies to come through and be able to operate their own self-driving vehicles. But what Tesla's equation is so unique, what makes them so unique is that they have millions of units of capacity already built, where with a software update, they can upgrade these cars to self-driving vehicles. And so if you do the math and you look at something like that, which realistically is going to cost no more than $30,000 per unit to make, versus, say, a Waymo, which costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, in the best case scenario, $100,000 per vehicle to make. And then if you compare it to, say, an Uber with a driver in the car or a taxi, which is close to $2 per mile, and you multiply that over the life of the vehicle, 500,000 miles, that's $500,000 of cost over 500,000 miles. It very quickly becomes very obvious that Tesla's solution will be by far the lowest cost per mile, which gives it a very unique advantage in this landscape of driving, because you're dramatically reducing the cost of transportation. Even at Waymo today, if you go on Waymo's app, again, fantastic product, the price per mile is still similar to that of an Uber. And it's not profitable as of yet because the technology is so expensive. They have to roll out these products very slowly because they have to create HD maps. And they can't make more than 1,000 or 10,000 units of these per year, realistically, maybe 20,000, versus Tesla's ability to make potentially 2, 3, 4, 5 million units per year of these. So you have an equation where you're flooding the market with millions of self-driving cars that cost a fraction of a dollar per mile versus the competitors. And then all of a sudden it becomes very obvious, like, okay, so if they can do that, right? If that software works, where they're able to leverage the manufacturing capacity to be able to manufacture millions of units per year, it becomes a very easy equation that says they're going to win. But it's 100% dependent on the software, the end-to-end neural net. And that's what 1010 is going to look to answer. It's like, hey, this is how we solved it. This is how we're going to execute it. And yeah, just hold on to your butts because we're going forward. That's what the company's looking to really prove on that date.
Listen, once we get a Jurassic Park reference, like hold on to your butts onto the show. Now we're ready to rock and roll. A follow-up on Waymo. I've ridden in Waymos out in San Francisco. I have no doubt a lot of our listeners have as well. What is your expectation with regards to how comparable or dissimilar the experience is? Because you're right. If I were to take a Waymo across the heart of San Francisco, it would probably, or an Uber versus a Waymo, it would be comparably priced, I think. Obviously, for a Waymo, you don't tip your driver, but there is a steering wheel. Everything does move as if it is a functioning car, and you kind of very quickly forget that you're sitting in the back of something that doesn't have a driver. To me, the challenge for a Waymo out there when I was in the Bay Area this year was just encouraging people to give it a shot. A lot of people still thought I was kind of crazy for being willing to jump into one of those. So talk to me about how the Waymo experience you expect may relate to what we learn on 1010. And then in general, how much of a challenge is it for Tesla to even encourage people to say, hey, you may have hesitancies about getting into an autonomous robotaxi like this, but we're confident in its safety?
That's such a good question. I think the hesitancy around self-driving vehicles is legit. It's real. A lot of people, I mean, you think about it, it's a do or die situation, being on the road, going, head on against each other at 55 miles an hour. There's only like a line separating us on the road, right? It's the craziest thing that we do as a species. It's like, yeah, road missiles, let's go, right? And then you're asking the person to then say, just let the robot do it, right? Yeah, just let the robot do it. It's crazy. But here's Tesla's key advantage, and this is sort of the theory I have. If the cost per mile is at a low enough level that the person that goes from like, okay, am I going to pay, let's see, $80 to go to the airport with somebody driving me there? Or maybe I'll pay $30 instead, but it's driverless and I have the car all to myself. It's private. I can change the radio. It has heated and cooled seats. It has a very comfortable seat. It's got a screen in there, right? It's, it says that I can tell it how fast or slow I want it to go. I want to get there quickly. I want to get there leisurely. I want to maximize safety. I want to get there as quickly as possible, right? Whatever. the equation changes completely. And so I think that's Tesla's core advantage is that they're going to be able to overcome a lot of those. This is my hypothesis, is that they should be able to overcome a lot of these just by dropping the price of utilizing the technology by a bunch. That's number one. And then number two, the feature set that you get from a self-driving vehicle changes the equation to where somebody's going to have a luxurious type of experience, privacy, entertainment, comfort at a lower cost than a competitor that doesn't offer that level of luxury, right? And so and then the third one, I think, and this is probably not very not something that can really be counted on today, but I do think that Tesla being Tesla, when I think about electric vehicles, when I talk to people about electric vehicles, 8 out of 10 people will create a sort of connection between electric vehicles and Tesla. It's like it's sort of becoming synonymous, at least in the States. From my experience, is like when you think Tesla, you think EV. But if you think EV, most of the time you think Tesla. And I think self-driving is going to become that sort of equation where you're going to be like for example, like Kleenex. We talk about Kleenex today. It's not really, we're not going to use a Kleenex. We're going to use like a napkin, right? It's just Kleenex has become such a good brand for napkins that it's just called Kleenex. Like Coke in the South. Can I have a Coke? Yes. What kind? Sprite. Okay. Well, Coke is soda, right? So I think that's what Tesla is going to become over time. Is I think that sort of name recognition and tied to the technology is going to help the adoption. It will take a decade or so to get there, but this is kind of what happens with having a leader like an Elon Musk out there at the forefront trying to push this forward and continually making technologies and breakthroughs like self-driving, like rockets landing themselves, like electric vehicles that people want, that starts setting this precedence for the public that says, okay, maybe I'll give it a shot. And then if it's already way cheaper than an Uber, there's a lot less friction and you kind of start removing barriers as well. So that's how I think about it. I could be wrong, but. No,
it's a really good take. I haven't heard it elsewhere in all my many Waymo conversations since trying. And again, I think it's a good point of comparison for people that are in the Bay Area. It's impossible to be around San Francisco and not see these things everywhere. It's very cool to give it a shot if you trust the technology. And I have not heard that argument about suddenly, if it is only $30 to get to the airport, it's comparably far cheaper than your competitors. You might be willing to say, oh yeah, I actually think they're pretty safe after all, especially if I can control my own music and have my own, my own flow of things. So I like that take a lot. But of course, this is, to some people, it is a great part of the Elon Musk brand right now. To others, it's a major headwind. You and I are having this conversation, Farzad, less than 45 days out from the presidential election, an election that Elon Musk has intentionally chosen to inject himself into firmly. And in doing so, not just as an equal arbiter of the news, but intentionally putting his fingers to the scale on one in favor of one side and against another. First, how are you approaching the general ethos of any of Elon Musk's companies, knowing that he is willing to ruffle feathers politically so close to an election like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think as an individual, I think it aligns with the way he carries himself very closely. I think the way Elon Musk functions is that if he thinks something's very important and it's civilizational in nature, that he can't help himself but throw his head in the ring. Because I think if you read his biography by Walter Isaacson, I think there's a level of personal responsibility that he thinks he has to engage in things that he deems important. And he has felt that it's important for him to sort of like go down this path to try and save civilization from his lens, right? And this is why this has created such a divide, because now you're talking about something that has moved from being objective, right? Whereas, rockets landing is an objective, you're looking for an objective solution, right? It's physics. Same thing with electric vehicles, same thing with self-driving technology. When it comes to a moral compass, right, it's a lot more subjective in nature, even though there are people out there that will say, well, I have an objective take on this and this is how it's going to work. And knowing how Elon Musk's brain works, he is on the spectrum. He's able to view things in a much more black and white way than an average human would, let's say. But there's still layers and gray in there, especially when you're talking about politics. That's going to muddy the waters tremendously, right? I think his endorsement of Trump comes from that place where he's viewing it from his lens of objectivity. But politics by nature is subjective, especially in our media landscape in the United States. I mean, boy, like we make anything political nowadays, right? And it muddies the waters tremendously. I do think, though, there is some strategic stuff going on with trying to get in favor of a political party. Like endorsing Trump, I think, for Elon was almost a default because of how the Biden administration handled his relationship to the Democratic Party for the last 4 years. Biden not inviting him to the EV summit. I think that was a huge blow. I mean, I personally thought, listen, that was right after I left Tesla. And I saw that, I come from a very biased place when it comes to that specific thing, right? I had just left Tesla in really good terms, on my own terms. I still have a bunch of friends there. And then I see the president of the United States completely ignore the company that's driving the thing that he's talking about, right? And then you think, and I'm like, what that, like, I'm thinking about all my friends that work at the company. And I think about my time there, blood, sweat, and tears, almost killing myself to try and move society forward in what I thought was the right way. And then you have this guy's like, no, GM, Mary led, she's the one that did it.
Mary
now
Barra,
imagine being
and
exactly.
if you don't mind me popping in, I think the thought for many people has been the reason Biden had that hesitancy is because of union labor support, the original three, the main auto manufacturers, because Tesla's labor system is different. Is that your understanding as well as to why Biden had the hesitancy that he did to give Tesla, to give Elon Musk their flowers, and instead talk about the Mary Barras of the world?
Yeah, I don't know how else to justify it, right? I mean, that has to be the justification. Otherwise, you're just basically coming up with a thing that says he's either oblivious to what Elon's doing or he's choosing to sideline him for whatever other reason, right? I think, the whole Union Joe mantra is one that he has to live up to. And let's not get it twisted, right? Let's also talk about the fact that Tesla is benefiting tremendously from subsidies that the United States has in place for electric vehicles. A lion's share of the EV tax credit is going to Tesla because they're the ones that are selling the most vehicles. But they're the ones that are selling the most vehicles. It's not like they're like stealing it. They're actually doing the thing that the subsidy is entitled to do. And let's not also forget that at the beginning of the subsidy for the IRA, their best-selling car was not included, the Model Y. And there had to be a grassroots movement to fix that. Ford Mach-E was also included, by the way. But I don't know what else. I don't know what else it would be. I think it had to have been Biden just ensuring that his union base was taken care of. But I think the unintended consequence of that is that, like you and I were speaking about, it has sidelined one of your greatest allies when it came to moving the United States towards the next generation of technology by sort of having this tech entrepreneur, even with all his flaws, let's say. But it's very obvious that he's doing net good for society, in my opinion, right? So, but then you're saying, nah, forget you. Mm-hmm. We're not going to deal with you. Let's just do your own thing, blah, blah, blah. And then Elon's like, okay, fine. I'll go to the other guys. They'll help me out.
And not only does he say we're going to go to the other guys, first of all, the endorsement comes after the first assassination attempt on Donald Trump, if I'm not mistaken. It's really as the dust is settling from that Saturday. Musk is like, without a doubt, this is my guy. That's number one. Number two, it seems as if, and I'm curious if you have thoughts on this. What I've noticed is that since the endorsement, they agreed to do an interview. This is Trump and Musk on X. Trump has now been using X much more ever since then. So remember, for a long time, Trump was not using the platform. So now I feel like there's something that I don't know what was agreed to upon, but suddenly out of nowhere, Trump, and the more Trump posts on X, ironically, he devalues shares of DJT, his own separate app for Trump Social, right? But in doing so, maybe he's kind of given up the DJT support for the Musk support, and Trump has also now evolved a little bit on EVs. What are you watching in that space? Because what Donald Trump says about EVs today doesn't seem to be what he has always said.
I agree, and I think that is in direct reflection of Elon's endorsement. I think if you listen to Donald Trump's rhetoric before the Elon endorsement, it was a hot mess of falsehoods and just the worst rhetoric I've ever heard about anything. Well, maybe not, but like something that I'm very, very much understand very deeply. he spoke as somebody that was intentionally trying to mislead what electric vehicles were actually capable of. Then the Elon Musk endorsement comes, and it's like, oh, I actually like EVs. You know, I think on one of the things he was talking about, and I know I think Donald Trump, the thing that he does that's very interesting is that he just talks smack 98% of the time when he's up there in front of a podium. So he's just constantly talking smack, right? And one of the things is like, well, you know, he endorsed me now, so now I have to support EVs, right? But I don't think that's that far from the truth. I think because of that endorsement, I do think Donald Trump is warming up, or his administration is going to do more to advance electric vehicles in the United States, because I think, you know, and not that the Democrats were doing a poor job. On the opposite, if it wasn't for the Democrats, we wouldn't have the sort of incentive structure that we have now. Yeah. But I do think the electric vehicle supply chain and autonomous vehicles are becoming a huge national security risk for the United States in the next 5 to 10 years, especially as China is ramping up their capability as they go all into electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles, right? That supply chain is the supply chain it's the energy supply chain and the transportation supply chain for the next 10, 20 years. And so if the United States is not making serious investments into this now, and credit to the Democrats for pushing this for the last 4-6 years, if we don't do this now, we're going to fall even further behind versus China in electric vehicle manufacturing, electric vehicle supply chain, battery supply chain, autonomous technology. These things become a thing of the past for us, and then you have China becoming a superpower from that perspective. So I just think there's too much strategic stuff for the Donald Trump administration to not take seriously, and perhaps that's I think Elon's trying to push that with them, and we'll see if it works or not, because I'm sure politicians say whatever to get elected. So we'll see if they'll actually execute.
I have noticed this phenomenon. Yes, I have. Yes. I am somewhat familiar. Or as Mario Cuomo used to say, you campaign in poetry, you govern in prose. And that actually, this is really a fundamental issue. It's not to get off topic, but with regards to EVs, with regards to the economy, anything you hear from Harris and Trump may sound great on the campaign trail, but for a lot of the stuff, you're going to need 60 Senate votes to get done. Neither of these parties are going to have 60 Senate votes. I mean, we're looking at like a jump ball 50-50 election, likely a broken Congress. But before I ask you a little bit more on Musk and a potential Trump administration, the administration now, Biden, to this last point you made, Farzad, proposed a banning of the majority of Chinese vehicles, what they call connected car technology, cars made there from U.S. roads due to, as you just said, national security concerns. Your personal thoughts on that, I wonder, and what that could mean for Tesla.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a smart move by the administration, because there is things that are tied to that technology that will allow a competing country to gain insight into your country. Like if you have an autonomous vehicle from China in the United States, and that autonomous vehicle can take pictures of your country and send it back to their mothership in China, that seems like you're being put at a disadvantage as a country, big time, right? So from that perspective, I think that's a smart thing to do. From Tesla's perspective, this does nothing but help them, obviously, because you're reducing their biggest competitors coming on their home court, in the United States. Don't get it twisted. China is doing phenomenal work when it comes to electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles. They are crushing it, mainly because they have a communist government, that's saying this is what you're going to do, and we're going to make sure you do this. And everybody's like, okay, that's what we're doing. Whereas in the United States is much more, you have capitalism at work more than anything. And you have a, lunatic genius guy that's willing to take that on as his project to play in capitalism, right? So I think it helps Tesla tremendously. But I think what it also highlights is that if it wasn't for Tesla in the United States, the manufacturing base of the United States for electric vehicles, for autonomous vehicles, would be nothing. Ford's not taking this on. GM's not taking this on. Right. Waymo is really the only company that is sort of this marriage of autonomous and electric, right? But again, they have like not even 1,000 vehicles in their fleet. It's peanuts. It's nothing. As amazing as the technology is, they operate in 2 or 3 cities, right? So what percentage of the population has access to this technology? 2 2 million, 3 million, like less than 1% of the United States population has access to this technology. And you have China that's like looking to manufacture millions of units of these per year. So it's smart, but it highlights just so many weaknesses from the United States perspective in manufacturing. And so my hope is in the coming years and decades that the United States takes this extremely seriously and really invests in the manufacturing and the creation and the birth of this supply chain manufacturing base that we need for the next generation technologies that are being led by Tesla today. But we need like 100 Teslas. We need 100 Teslas in the country building in the United States to ensure that we're not falling behind our biggest competitor when it comes to this stuff, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good point. And you're right. Waymo was only in a few cities. I think when I was there, San Francisco, I think Austin, LA was a relatively new market, but I live
in Arizona.
I live in Queens.
Yeah.
I don't see how a Waymo could ever do well in this environment, right? I mean, it's a fundamentally different driving system and chaos, but of course we don't have anything like that in New York anyway. So even if we wanted to. One more here on the government efficiency committee, this idea of Donald Trump saying, hey, I'm going to promise a gig here to Elon Musk. I don't have all the details. Some of it's ambiguous. Your thoughts on that committee, your thoughts on what Elon Musk would look like, and then really what does that mean in terms of the totality, this messy depth of all these other companies Elon Musk is involved in if he were to accept some type of formal role with the next Trump administration?
I think that's the biggest outstanding question, because the thought of a government efficiency thing, group, committee, whatever. I mean, that makes me so happy to hear as a taxpayer. And that's like, I'll give you my take here. When you think about taxpayers in the United States, those that are paying federal tax, okay, a huge percentage of our taxes are going to the federal government. And by and large, we don't really know how that money is being spent. We know that a huge amount of it goes to the military. We know a huge amount of it goes to healthcare, right? But the biggest chunk of our paycheck is federal costs. And if you look at the effectiveness of those dollars, I'll use Boeing as a perfect example, okay? If you've been following this Boeing Starliner thing, going to space, okay? They made a deal with NASA for $5.4 billion. Correct me in the show notes or whatever. This is wrong information, but somewhere in the $5 billion range that Boeing got from the government, the federal government, to put astronauts into space. Okay, SpaceX got half of that amount-ish, about 2.6, 2.8. I forget what the exact number was. Half the amount, and the goal was to create capacity in the United States to send astronauts to space, with the government outsourcing a lot of this stuff to the private sector, right? Boeing sent those astronauts to space, right? And I'm sure everybody has heard this. They're stuck in the International Space Station because the capsule didn't work right, okay? And that was their first launch after 6 years or something. It took them 6 years to do one launch, and they messed it up, okay? In the same amount of time, SpaceX has done that mission like 13 times for half the price, okay? Now extrapolate that to literally every single thing the government spends money on. There is like stories, and I know people close to me that tell stories about the military, that there are people literally just shooting rounds into the mountain, hundreds of thousands of rounds, just wasting the rounds so that they get the same amount in the budget next year, so they can justify the same amount. So they have to waste all this money so they get the same amount of money next year. Extrapolate this to every single other government thing that we're doing, right? So it's very easy to see that we're extremely inefficient when it comes to spending our money. We are not very good at understanding where the money's going. And so props to President Trump, and really props to Elon for bringing this up as an idea even. We need something like that. However, what does that mean from an execution perspective, right? Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, XAI, Boring Company, Starlink. He's in a lot of industries. He's in a lot of industries that are probably in at least connected in an adjacent manner to the things that he would be looking to say make more efficient. Like even if you look at the military, right? They have different contracts with Starlink and SpaceX. Okay. how is Elon going to be able to go in and be like, we need to save money over here, but we shouldn't save money over here because that's going to impact my business, right? And I'm not saying he's going to do that. That's the conflict of interest part that comes in. So does that mean he has to divest from SpaceX and Tesla and stuff, which I don't see happening?
Yeah.
What does this committee look like? Is it more of a recommendation committee, and then you sort of offload that to a different party to allow them to execute? But if that party is the government, then what's the likelihood that's going to get executed, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to see what the logistics are behind this. It's a brilliant idea. I don't have a lot of hope that it's going to actually get executed because there's going to be a lot of conflict of interest, but I could be wrong. And I hope I'm wrong on that, because that's one that I'm very happy to be wrong on.
So I hadn't thought about this until you were talking, but here's what it reminds me of. Remember when Musk took over Twitter and he came in with the whole kitchen sink?
Yes.
Did the kitchen sink bit? This to me is Trump being like, bro, do you want to carry the kitchen sink into the federal government and cut rid of all the waste? But here's what happened, right? As soon as the artist formerly known as Twitter started crapping out, started failing, Musk tried to do the endorsement interview, the launch interview with Ron DeSantis, everything crashed. He tried to do this other high profile thing, everything crashed.
Yeah.
What does everyone on Twitter say? Well, bro, here's the receipt. You fired all these people. You came in and you said, we're going to cut the fat, we're going to cut the waste, blah, blah. And now you have a platform when you want everyone to listen, and it's not working right now.
Yeah.
Don't you run the risk of that with the federal government, with Elon Musk
1,000%.
bringing in and now saying, cool, bro, you cut all this spending. Now we have no money for these natural resources because you, Donald Trump, entrusted the dude from Tesla, respectfully, and all these other companies to cut the fat for the federal government.
They will be screaming bloody murder the second the slightest bit of weakness is sensed in that execution, because there will be weakness by default. If you have a very inefficient system and you have a lot of people tied to that system, the second you start cutting, you're going to have incredible amount of problems because the system is not working the way it's supposed to be. And the way you shine light on those problems is that you delete everything. I learned this from my time at Tesla. You delete everything and you let the problems come up, and then you make the priority list of here are the most important ones. Fix. The luxury Elon has with a private company, or even with a public company, is that he's the boss. So he can shoulder the pain and the noise and the chaos, and the teams there can shoulder the pain, the noise, and the chaos and fight through that noise. And that's how huge change gets done, is that you overcome in the face of adversity and just chaos, right? The federal government, there are people that are going to look for failure so that they can use it to leverage their own political gain, their own game, right? This is like a completely different thing that's going on here, right? So it's a brilliant point. It's a brilliant point. It will totally happen. People will ask for this to be reverted immediately. Do you remember when the U.S. When we weren't able to pass a budget? I think it was like 5-6 years ago or something, and the air traffic control went down for like a day. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're like, oh no, pass it. Forget it. Yeah, go ahead and pass it, right? So that's what's going to happen. It's going to be something similar to that. So unless they're willing to shoulder that on, if they're able to execute, this would be literally one of the greatest feats of all time, is to take this albatross, ridiculous, super bloated, inefficient thing and then fix it. And good luck doing that in 4 years, right?
I mean, listen, and of course, every congressional cycle, you get people that run for office and they run on a comparable platform, right? The idea of like cutting the waste, cutting the fat, whatever, this isn't new in and of itself. To turn the power of whatever this looks like into the hands of someone like Musk would certainly be new. My man, this has been a long conversation. I do want to sneak in one more bit here if I can.
Of course.
It's back to that Boeing SpaceX thing. So, despite all the controversies, despite all of the issues, you still sit there and you say Elon Musk is a business leader. Like, to me, SpaceX is one of the greatest things. I am such a big SpaceX fan. I think NASA is only having the moment that it is because of SpaceX. I think the Artemis missions are really only possible because of a SpaceX. And now I feel like SpaceX is coming in and saving the ass of Boeing with regards to, as you said, these astronauts on the ISS. How do you see that playing out? And does that strengthen Elon Musk's hands a bit to sort of negotiate with the government, maybe even negotiate with a future President Harris if Trump loses the election, to say, hey, you may not like everything that I do, but let's not forget what some of my companies have done to help support NASA and other federal government initiatives?
For sure it does. I think it would be silly for, again, like, I hope if the Harris administration wins, they don't do like a Biden 2.0 where you ignore the good that he has created for the United States sovereignty and their national security, without a doubt. Like, if it wasn't for SpaceX and Tesla and Starlink, the United States would be in a worse place. It just would, like, objectively speaking, we would not be in as good of a place as we are now. And so my hope is that a lot of the rhetoric now is just a bunch of posturing politics. It's God, like you said, we're 45 minutes away, 45 days. It feels like minutes. 45 days away. It feels like seconds even. We're very close to an election. There's going to be a ton of rhetoric. It's going to get, especially this one with the assassination attempts. It's crazy. We live in a crazy time right now. But I do think Elon, the longer time passes, the more leverage he has, especially as his competitors are not doing anything to get any closer to him from a capability perspective. I mean, like, Boeing I'll say it is a national embarrassment when it comes to this stuff. It is awful. As a taxpayer, I can't believe that I'm watching a company that large with that much pedigree waste taxpayer money the way they're doing it. It's crazy. And then you look at their 747 and 737 failures and stuff. That's crazy too. Just so on and so forth. GM's falling behind from an EV perspective. Ford, they're trying their best, but they're nowhere close. The only ones that are really keeping track with Tesla from a legacy perspective are brands like Kia, Hyundai. BMW is doing a pretty good job, honestly, with their luxury brands and stuff. And then you have the Chinese. And then everything else is freaking Chinese, just, overtaking. So the longer time passes, the more leverage he has. I do hope that regardless of which president wins, I do think there is room for these people, whoever it is, to come together with the ultimate goal of making the United States into a more powerful player for the next generation systems for transportation and energy and space. Because if we do that, we win. And it just so happens that we have one guy leading that, again, with all his flaws. But I personally believe his heart is in the right place. And I think as a United States, we have to figure out how to work together with this guy. We have to leverage, I call him a laser. The biography of Walter Isaacson really put this sort of image in my head, is that Elon Musk is the most powerful laser humanity has. And sometimes that laser gets pointed at the wrong thing. Sometimes, it's like, politics, divisive rhetoric, just, and he goes hardcore, right? But I think as a society, we should embrace the power and talent of this guy, sure, and help guide that laser towards more productive stuff. And when you just sideline the guy, he's going to start pointing that laser to places where it's not going to be as productive. So
you know what? And I think a lot of people might agree with me when I say, man, can we just shift the laser away from the controversies? Like, go back to the rockets, man. We got another Starship launch coming up. You're getting us back on the lunar lander with the Artemis
freedom
mission.
Of speech, baby. Freedom of speech.
We're like, don't stop with the freedom of speech. Please focus on these other things. And it's not a personal thing either, right? You got analysts like Dan Ives at Wedbush Securities who cover Tesla. They say a lot of these other things are kind of distractions from time to time. Go ahead.
If I could say one thing, like, I don't think you get that without the other thing. I think that's just the truth. I think it's just reality of humanity. Humans are gray. We are imperfect. We are complex, right? And if there's one thing I can take away from the Elon Musk arc, is that he is the most perfect example of the duality of man. It's just, if you get extreme success, you're also going to get some extreme weirdness going on that is enabling that success. That same exact thing that feeds the brilliance, it also feeds the chaos. And in reality, I'm a firm believer of this. You cannot have brilliance without chaos in some form. It's just, he has decided that the world gets to see the chaos. And here you go, so we'll see.
We certainly will. My man, this is an awesome conversation. We ran long, but I'm grateful for your time because there's just a lot of really important stuff here at the intersection of all these to get into. That's Farzad Mesbahi, former longtime Tesla insider. Very grateful for your perspective today, man. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I can go on for hours. Next time, let's make it a 3-hour conversation.
Let's do it again. Listen, we'll be a little closer to the election. These stories are not going away, even after the election, because whoever wins, it's going to be a fascinating look for how Elon Musk plays a role. So we'll continue the conversation. Thanks, Farzad.
Thank you.